Great to be joined here on Flow FM by the Shadow Treasurer, Angus Taylor. Thanks for joining us today on Flow, Angus.
Thanks for having me, Ricky.
Look, this commentary we're going to dive into is really triggered by an essay released by Jim Chalmers, the Federal Treasurer, about where he wants to go with the economy in Australia. I mean, first of all, what do you make as a general takeaway of what this signals for the Albanese government?
Well, the first point I'd make is that the Treasurer has spent his summer writing a theoretical essay on neoliberalism instead of focusing on cost of living challenges that I know Australians are really feeling as they come back from their holidays and look at the expenses that they had to deal with over their holiday period and Christmas. I know so many Australians are struggling to make ends meet. That's what they're focused on. And the Treasurer is focused on something very, very different. And I think that says a lot about this government and says a lot about the Treasurer.
Well, what I've seen a lot in politics is also that you never want to talk the economy down, but you've got the Treasurer here outlining this new term he's latched onto, a poly-crisis. I mean, we say on Flow the word crisis is abused a lot in politics. Are we in a poly-crisis in Australia?
Well, there's certainly a crisis with some polys, and that shows up with the Treasurer, that's for sure. Look, you know, I've learned in my time in politics that we need to listen to what people care about and the issues that they're dealing with, and that what's very clear is they are dealing with a situation where interest rates have been going up as sharply as anyone can remember. Inflation, we know, is sticky. We've just got some new numbers came out in the last week or so just telling us how strong inflation is. I mean, food prices have gone up over 9% in the last year, and everyone feels that. Energy, of course, is a real challenge for us. We need a government and a Treasurer that's focused on dealing with those issues. And sadly, this essay says exactly the opposite, that in fact we've got a Treasurer that's more interested in navel-gazing than dealing with the practical issue.
Well, does it also represent a bit of a fork in the road for the government in terms of the Hawke-Keating era of what they were doing with their economic reforms there? It does appear also amidst the debate about the Indigenous voice, and you talk about navel-gazing. Are there pet projects the Albanese government's adopting a bit like the Whitlam era?
Well, there's no question that embedded in this is an idea the government should be at the centre of everything. And, that's the Treasurer believes he should be at the centre of the economy. The truth is, I've learnt in the course of my career, which was mostly not in politics, it was in business and farming, that in fact it's important to put the people who are at the front line doing things, running businesses, working in businesses, they're the most important people in any economy, and you've got to enable and empower them rather than enable and empower the government. And I think Labor's got this completely wrong. It's completely at odds with the philosophy of Hawke and Keating, as you just pointed out. It's much more Whitlam-esque in its philosophy. Hawke and Keating understood that the Australian people needed to be at the centre of the Australian economy. The Australian people needed to be at the centre of Australian society and local communities. It's not for the government to take their place. It's for them to be enabled. It's for the government to support them in realising their aspirations. And I think the moment we lose sight of that, we are in very dangerous territory.
Well, this essay by Jim Chalmers does seem to lay into the ideology of, I guess, the former government, but he launches all these metaphorical missiles. But does he actually land any blows on measures actually taken by the coalition during the pandemic?
Well, I mean, I think it's extraordinary. It's bizarre because Australia had a performance better than almost any other country in the world on the pandemic, whether you look at the health outcomes or the economic outcomes. I mean, he's inherited in the last calendar year a budget that is very close to surplus, which is a remarkable position to be in, given that only a little over a year ago we were in the throes of the pandemic. So there's no question that Australia has performed well. Australia is a resilient country. I mean, claims that we're not. We are incredibly resilient. We've been resilient for a long, long time, and it's one of our great strengths. And the key for government is to tap into that great strength rather than to try to replace it with some kind of government largesse.
Well, when you mention that big R word, resilience, it does appear the other R word, offshore, would be recession, where things are heading. Do you think that we're going to be resilient and maybe stave off the worst of what a global recession might bring if that's indeed where we're heading?
Well, most economists will say that Labor inherited one of the strongest economies in the world. And the real test for Labor is whether they can maintain that strength and build from that strength. I think that's unclear. I think that the fact that the Treasurer has spent the summer navel-gazing and writing a 6,000-word essay tells us something about their priorities. But it remains to be seen whether we'll stay out of recession. What's clear is that there's continuing upward pressure on interest rates and inflation. The Reserve Bank will be meeting next Tuesday, and they've got to make a decision about whether that they have to raise interest rates, and this is where the government needs a clear plan. It's always easier for a Reserve Bank to not raise interest rates if it's clear that the government is taking the right steps, and we'll see next Tuesday what the outcome is.
Well, I notice also Jim Chalmers points to one of the key planks of the government's economic plans is this transition to renewable energy. Yet we had, you mentioned you're a former farmer yourself, New South Wales Farmers President Xavier Martin told Flow FM last week farmers are worried about solar farms, turbines and transmission lines running across prime farming land with, in his words, virtually no regulation. Even your Nationals colleague David Littleproud calls it platinum plating the energy grid. You're a former energy minister yourself. Is renewable energy transition a way to help people with their cost of living?
Well, you've got to get the balance right. I mean, with all of these things, it's about balance. I mean, building endless high-cost transmission lines all over the shop is not the right answer. That's Labor's answer. But that being said, we do need investment in the right targeted, prioritised transmission lines. There are good renewable projects, and there's ones that are much more challenging. And so getting the balance right is the key with any of this. What we don't see from Labor is that sense of balance. We always see this kind of utopian vision that they're going to lead us to, and every time, given a couple of years, no doubt, you see that it's just a flop. And sadly, I think we're going in the same direction.
Well, Angus Taylor, the Shadow Treasurer, joining us here on Flow FM. Thanks so much for your comments, and let's hope the little Aussie battler can keep staving off the worst of the recession.
I have great belief in the little Aussie battler. I'm sure he or she will do extremely well because they always do, because they are resilient, Ricky.